here. Tonight we are going to be making some pan-seared New York strips with a creamy tomato and basil pasta, and we're going to bake up our 2 sourdough breads that we have. So I'm going to start with our traditional loaf that we made, which is our basic sourdough loaf, and then we'll put our bacon Gouda in the oven. I've got my Dutch ovens here preheated. They've been in the oven for the last hour at 500, so they're nice and hot and toasty. And we're going to put our sourdoughs in here, and we'll bake them for 20 minutes with the lid on at 500, then 20 minutes with the lid off at 450. So this is our basic sourdough loaf: 500 grams flour, 375 grams warm water, 100 grams active starter, and about 10 grams of salt. So just a super simple, easy sourdough. And put it in here. Our Dutch ovens are very, very hot, so always use your oven mitts when transferring. I've got it in there nice and ready. We're going to put the lid back on this guy. And let's prep our next one. I'm going to get my parchment paper out. I always use parchment paper. I know you can get those like silicone little slings, but I always have parchment paper and it works well. This is our Gouda, thyme, and black pepper loaf. So I'm going to flip it out on, and we're going to do our little design. I think I'll do a cross and then a little line in each one. And then we're gonna put it in our Dutch oven here. Gotta get my mitts because don't want to accidentally grab these. Dutch ovens are very, very hot. They are made out of cast iron, so they retain their heat very well. So we've got it in there, and we're gonna go pop these in our oven. And I have my oven preheated to 500 degrees. So we're gonna bake at 500 degrees with the lid on for 20 minutes. And then we'll take the lid off and bake at 450 degrees for another 15-20 minutes until it's at the nice coloring that we want. So we've got both my ovens in there. And then I'm gonna set my timer so I don't forget for 20 minutes. Okay, now we can start prepping our dinner. I have some water here boiling for our pasta. So we're gonna put that in here because this pasta takes a hot minute to cook. We're using rigatoni. So out of the pastas, rigatoni is one of the pastas that take the longest, but it's kind of nice because it keeps its shape well. So it's really good if you're going to use it in like a baked pasta dish. We give this a nice little stir. And I'm going to let that cook up. Okay. Now we're going to start by prepping our steaks. So I have 5 New York strips here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to season them just with a little bit of Worcestershire sauce and a little bit of garlic salt. Not much. The steak is really going to be the show for this. And then we'll make our little sauce using some tomatoes and onions and basil and cream. And then we'll prep a little salad. So before I flip it, I want to sprinkle this with a little bit of garlic salt over the top, and we'll let these sit and kind of marinate for a few minutes before we do our pan searing. And we're gonna pan sear them, and then I'll finish cooking them in the oven. It just works well. I typically love to grill my steaks, but right now we are having a bit of a windstorm outside. Earlier today, like I looked outside and it looked like a mini cyclone. There were leaves were twirling around, and we're getting pretty strong winds. So hopefully we don't lose power, but we did have a couple of flickers. So I'm not gonna go outside and grill in the middle of this because with my luck, a branch will fall on me. There we go. So we've got our steaks nice and seasoned. We're gonna let them sit in these juices for a little bit. And then we're gonna start prepping up our vegetables, but I'm gonna go wash my fingers. You know, it's funny, when we were remodeling our kitchen, I realized how much I wash my hands while cooking, because when we had to unexpectedly rip out our kitchen, our dining room, and our laundry room. So we used our office as our kitchen. And I had like a crock pot, Instapot, like an induction pan, whatnot, because it just wasn't feasible to relocate for like 5 months. And so I realized not having like a sink right there, I was like constantly like running back to the bathroom to wash my hands nonstop. You just don't realize it until you can't do it. So right now I'm gonna do a nice small mince on my onions. I'm using a yellow onion right here because we're gonna saute it up in some oil in just a second. But we're gonna do a kind of a small mince on it. And cut through this one. And the reason we're doing a nice mince on it is because this is gonna go with our pasta, and we're using rigatoni. So we want it to kind of be a bit more delicate than to have like bigger strands of the onion. So I'm just gonna kind of go over it now, like bigger strands of the onion. So I'm just gonna kind of go over it now, coarsely chop it after I've done our little mincing so we can have some nice tender pieces. There we go. Okay, so we've got our onion minced up. I'm gonna add a little bit of oil to our saute pan, and it's about a tablespoon or so in there, and I'm gonna turn up my heat to about a 7, so like a medium high, and put our onions in and let them start to saute. There we go. And then I'm gonna use a little bit of garlic. You could use fresh garlic if you wanted to, but I'm just going to use the rest of this. I'm going to get a spoon. And scoop out. So this is going to be about, I'm just going to use up the rest in this container. So it's going to be about a heaping teaspoon of garlic, which would be close to 2 to 3 cloves. There we go. I always feel like it takes me an age to finish up my garlic. There we go. And then I'm going to get my spoon and I'm going to give it a nice stir. I'll use tongs. I like my tongs. We're going to kind of coat our garlic and our onions in the olive oil. There we go. Nice fresh. And now I'm gonna give my noodles a little bit of a stir because sometimes they can stick together. Okay. Now we're going to chop up some of our other ingredients that we're gonna be using for our pasta. So I have some cherry tomatoes, and we are going to kind of halve these, and I have some fresh basil and some parsley. But before I do that, I'm going to sharpen up my knife. I noticed when I was cutting my onion, it was starting to slip. And the number one way to get cut in a kitchen is with a dull knife. So if you have a knife set, you're going to get a honing steel with it. It's kind of like a little sword, like a little épée. So to sharpen up your knife, all you're going to do is you just kind of slide the blade down, and it's going to just sharpen up. You don't even have to do it for very long, and your knife will be sharp in no time. So I'm doing one side, and then I'm gonna do the opposite side to sharpen that blade up. And this will help me cut through my tomatoes with ease. because if your blade slips on a tomato or an onion, that's when you know it needs to be sharp, and that's how you're gonna get cut. So you see how these are just like cutting through with ease. That means we have a nice sharp knife. And things, it's kind of counterintuitive. People think, oh, sharp knives are what get you cut. It's like it's the dull knives, because then you slip when you're cooking, you have less control. And I said onions, tomatoes, and peppers, anything with that kind of thicker, chewy skin, it's really easy for your knife to slip. So we've got our tomatoes. These are our cherry tomatoes. We're gonna have these. That way they sweat a little bit in our sauce, but they'll kind of saute up nice. And then we're just gonna add a little bit of marinara sauce to kind of boost up our little tomato flavor in it. But it's not a true tomato sauce. It's more like we're gonna do a kind of creamy sauce with a little bit of tomatoes. But let me give our onions a nice stir. They're starting to caramelize here. There we go. And I want them to kind of get a nice little golden brown color. That's when the natural sugars have really come out and to have started to kind of sweeten up the onion. Which is what when you're making pastas or soups or stews, you want to get that rich flavor out. So you always want to kind of caramelize them or saute them up before. I always do them. They're typically my first vegetable that I saute up in my pans. Just a few more cherry tomatoes. There we go. And perfect. Put that in my trash here. And then we'll give this, and again, another little stir with my tongs. I'm using a non-stick pan here with, this is a hex clad. I absolutely love it. But whenever I'm using a non-stick, make sure you either use wood, plastic, or silicone-coated utensils, because metal can scratch, especially like if it's a Teflon-coated pan. If you scratch it, then you ruin your pan, and you can make it dangerous, because it could leach in chemicals. So invest in some good silicone utensils if you want. I love silicone because they're heat resistant up to about 500 degrees, which means you don't have to worry about leaving them in the heat for an extended period of time. Okay, right now I'm getting some fresh basil. I picked up a little container at the store because my poor basil plants over there need a little break. Be nice when summer gets here and I can grow. I'll typically plant around 10 different basil plants for us to use over the summer. I do some purple basil as well as the regular basil, and we use them I make homemade pestos. We just use basil in so much things. Also love to make like a good homemade lemonade with some basil in it. Purple basil, so good. So we're gonna give our basil a little bit of mince. Right now I'm taking off any of the stems, so you're really just left with the leaves. The stems will just kind of add a chewy texture to our pasta instead of the nice tender flavor that the leaves will add. Let's give this, I can see we've got the nice caramelization starting on our onions. Beautiful. See that we got this golden and the brownish. This is perfect what you want. You know they're going to be nice and ready. And I'm going to give my noodles a quick stir just because I don't want them to stick together. Okay, now that we have our onions nice and caramelized, I'm going to throw in our tomatoes. And then we'll give it a little toss, and then we'll also put in our basil in just a second. So we're just going to kind of coat them with the onion mixture and the residual olive oil in here. And we're going to finish mincing up this basil. This one's going to be about, when we're done chopping it up, around a third of a cup of fresh basil minced up. I really like to use fresh basil over dried basil because it just isn't quite the same flavor profile. But if you didn't have fresh basil, you could use some of the basil paste that you can get in the refrigerated section of like the produce aisle. That works a little bit better than just straight up dried basil. Now we're just gonna kind of go over and mince it up. Beautiful. And then I'm just gonna reserve a little bit of this for later for some garnishes at the end. And that will just add a nice little brightness also to the top of our pasta. And give this a stir. Beautiful. Smells lovely. And then I'm going to start warming up our pan to sear off our steaks. So I'm just going to put a little bit of oil in here to kind of prevent the steaks from sticking to it. I'm using, this is a scan pan, and it is kind of like a really thin skillet, like cast iron skillet. It has a cast iron coating on it, so, but you don't have to kind of season it as much as you do a like a regular skillet or cast iron skillet. So get that basil off right there, and we're going to take our parsley here, grab a bunch out, and we're going to give it a quick little rinse. Squeeze out that excess water. And then I'm going to mince up. I'm going to just remove some of these stalks right here. This is like the tips of the parsley. Those won't add any extra flavor, and they'll just be chewy. So just make sure you always try to get those out. That way you just have the nice tender leaf in your pasta. And we're going to do a nice little mince on our parsley as well. This is also going to be about 1/4 of a cup when it's all minced up, and we'll save a little bit for garnish, but the rest will go into our pasta to bring out a nice, vibrant flavor. There we go. And perfect. So I'm just kind of mincing it over. I'm going to leave a little bit to garnish for later. And then we're going to add this into our pasta. Perfect. And then I'm going to toss it with my tongs. Kind of coat our tomatoes up. And beautiful. And now we are going to sear off our steaks. So let me get another set of tongs. And I'm going to put, these are my New York strips that we seasoned with garlic, salt, and Worcestershire sauce. I'm going to put them in my nice hot oil, and we're going to just sear them off. I'm going to do 3 followed by 2. And we're going to cook them nice and hot, browning on each side, and then we'll finish them off in the oven. I'm going to check my pasta, see how they are. Still pretty firm. They'll still need a few more minutes before I need to take them out. I always say rigatoni always takes a lot longer to cut up, or like to cook up, than a regular pasta. Okay. Now we have our steak searing here. We've got our pasta cooking. And get ready for take our lids off in just a second. And we're going to use a little bit of our pasta water in our tomato base to kind of season it up. So I'm going to get a ladle out, and we're going to just bring a little bit of our pasta water in our tomato base to kind of season it up. So I'm going to get a ladle out, and we're going to just bring a little bit of that. Okay, so I'm going to use my ladle and get a little bit of pasta water over. This pasta water has a little bit of starch in it, which will help thicken up our pasta sauce. I'm going to let it simmer for just a little bit. Get a nice stir. And then we're going to put a little bit of garlic salt in here. I'm going to use about a teaspoon and a half for our pasta. And we're going to let this simmer on low for just a little bit. There we go. I think we're just about to take the lid off of our sourdough bread. So let me check on our steaks, see if we have a nice browning sear on them. Almost. Just about a minute or so longer on these. Okay, let me check my time. Okay, we can go. We have about a minute left, so we can go take the lid off of our sourdough bread. Okay, we'll do our first one. I'll take out and show you guys here. This is our bacon, or our Gouda black pepper and thyme. Put that back in here. I put this lid over here because it's very hot. And then our second loaf is just our basic sourdough traditional loaf. So, I'm gonna turn my temperature down to 450. So let me cancel out here, and then we'll do. And the reason why you bring it down to 450, if you cook it with the lid off at 500, you're more likely to burn it. And then I'm gonna set my timer for about 15 to 18 minutes. That's typically when it's all cooked up. We've got these right over here. And now we are going to flip our steaks and sear off the other side. We've got a nice little brown crust on them. And we're going to finish these off in the oven. This is really just to sear and get you that nice flavor on it. Perfect. And then let me check our noodles and see how they are going. I'll just pull one out and give it a quick taste. Perfect. I don't know if you can see, but if the inside of your noodle is white, it's not ready. So this is cooked all the way through. It's not white. So we're going to drain them, and then we'll put it right back over here. So I've got it. Before I drain it, I'm going to use one more ladle of this good liquid. This is our starchy liquid. It's great for thickening up a pasta sauce. So just going to add a little bit more into our simmering tomatoes, basil, and parsley. Perfect. Now, I'm going to use my thing because my pan's a little hot. Here is our penne, or our rigatoni, not our penne. And we're gonna have it cooking right there. Let me stir my tomatoes, basil, and onions. We're gonna let it simmer. Soon we're gonna add in a little bit of cream and some Parmesan cheese. But right now, I've got this steak seared off. Let me grab this cutting board. What I'm going to do is I'm gonna transfer them out, sear these off, then we're going to put this whole frying pan in the oven for about 5 minutes to finish cooking. So I'm going to put it right back on this cutting board, but this is all going to go in my oven, very hot oven. So you don't have to worry about putting raw back on there. It's going to get heated up nicely. Perfect. So we've got our nice little pan searing off. And then we're going to sear off these two steaks. These are New York strips. I marinated them with a just Worcestershire and garlic sauce. Now we have our tomatoes are simmering in our pasta water with fresh basils, onion, and parsley, and garlic. And I'm gonna just give it a little taste to see if we need to add any more salt or seasoning before we add our cream and a little bit of marinara sauce to it. And then last, we'll top it off with some cheese. Perfect, it has the right amount of saltiness. So we're gonna grab a little bit of marinara sauce. I'm using Rayo's, it's my favorite. You know, it wasn't until a couple streams ago, I had no idea how to pronounce it. And I just kept saying Rouse because I just looked at it. And then I realized Rouse makes no sense. That's like an Asian pronunciation versus Italian. And somebody on the stream happened to tell me that how it was pronounced. So I added about 1/3 of a cup in here. We're just gonna let it simmer. It's just gonna give a bit more of a tomato body to our sauce, our cream sauce, but not be overpowering because this is not like a marinara spaghetti. Let's give our steaks a quick flip right here. We've got a nice sear off of these. This is just gonna give it a nice flavored crust for it. Perfect. And I'm gonna turn this up just a little bit, and we're gonna add in a little bit of cream to our sauce. And we want to keep our temperature on fairly low because we don't want anything to curdle. We're going to add, that was probably about 1/2 cup to our tomatoes and the pasta water, which is going to allow our sauce to kind of simmer and thicken up. You see it has this beautiful kind of pale orange color. And give it a nice little stir here. We're gonna let it simmer, let the basil really like seep out and flavor it. Give it a nice little taste. Perfect. Sometimes when you add dairy to your food, it kind of cuts out and might make it less salty or less seasoned. So always try it, taste after you add dairy because that can kind of really dull out some flavors. That's why I always like to make it just a bit more saltier seasoned than I would before I add the dairy. Okay, we've got a good sear on these, so I'm going to turn off this pan. I'm going to add in all of my steaks, and then we're going to pop these in the oven right underneath our sourdough, and we're going to let them finish cooking to about a medium rare. I'm going to try to make everyone touch the bottom of my pan, because if you have them stacked up on each other, the one that's stacked up won't cook as fast as the other one. So just gonna have to push it in there. And that way they'll also be in their nice juices. Okay, we're gonna pop this in the oven now. And the reason I do this is if you try to cook your steak all the way through on the stove, you're just going to end up with a very dry, tough steak. So what I do is I sear it off, and then I finish it on the oven for just a few minutes, and that way I'll have a nice tender middle, medium rare, that's the way I like it, with a nice seasoned outside. Okay, I'm going to slide this over here, turn it off, and turn this down on low. And we see how I've got a lovely simmer in here. You want to make sure you just have a very low simmer with your sauce. If it gets too high, the cream in it can curdle and then you'll have a little chunky sauce. So think about with the cream sauce, low and slow for the best. I'm going to just clean this out of there, and then we're going to make a quick salad, and then we'll add some cheese and toss our pasta, and dinner will be ready in a few minutes. So let me just clean up this area and grab my things. Always remember when you're making it, these are really hot and they stay hot for like a hot minute, like at least 10-15 minutes after you take them out. They're made out of cast iron, so they really hold the heat. I have made the mistake of grabbing them just because I forgot, and I regretted that. So always use your oven mitts. Let me grab my stuff for my salad. I've got just a basic, simple salad over here. We're just gonna do some romaine, a cucumber, an English cucumber or baby cuke, some peppers, and some Parmesan cheese, and then we'll use a little bit of that Parmesan in our sauce. So, I'm gonna grab a paring knife. I already rinsed my peppers and my cucumbers here. So we're gonna put in our salad. There we go. I always like when I have pasta, I feel like salad is the best side that goes with it. Like, you need a vegetable, and I feel like salad, it just is a nice kind of refreshing side to it. Like, you know, just makes it a little bit more refreshing, especially with a heavier pasta like this. Beautiful. And then once we've got this simmering, I'll add the cheese, and then we'll add our noodles in there and coat it, but we wait until the very end. So we've got our baby cucumber. I love cucumbers, but I find that the best for salads are either the English cucumbers or the baby ones. If you get the big ones with the shiny skin, they're really chewy, and so you have to peel those. But these baby cucumbers or English cucumbers have a very, like, a tender skin. It doesn't, like, you can't tell the difference between the inside and the skin of it, which is perfect for salads. Like, my kids love these in salads, but they don't like the other ones. The other ones are great for, like, pickling, if you're gonna pickle, or if you're gonna peel and do just, like, you know, a cucumber salad with them. Those are great to use for those as well. But for eating just straight up like this without having to peel them, the baby cukes or the English cucumbers are the best. And then we're gonna do some sweet peppers. Slice these up. I'm just using, this is a paring knife. It's part of my Wusthof collection. I love it. I've had this collection forever. So if you have the funds to invest in a good knife collection, I would say do it, because they'll stick with you forever. I mean, I've had these for going on almost 16, 17 years, and they work great. Just as good as they did from the day we got them. And they were a wedding gift for us. I did a non-traditional route. I did not want china. I wanted nice pots and pans and nice knives. So my siblings went together on a knife set for us, and my parents gave us an all-clad set. And so that was what I wanted. I was like, I don't need china. I want the stuff to make the good food. And then we're gonna put a little bit of Parmesan in here for our salad. And that will be served there. And now we're gonna add some to our pasta. I like to add it towards the very end, because if you add it too soon, it will, you know, it will melt in your thing, but then it can stick to the bottom of your pan and burn. So add it towards the end. That's about, I want to say, a half a cup, maybe a little bit less. We're going to add it in here, and then we're going to take our rigatoni, and we're going to just put it all in here and toss it in here. And really coat it. Rigatoni is great for this one because the sauce gets inside the little tubes, and it's just so delicious. Perfect. Got an escapee. And then we'll serve this with our steak. I like to cut up my steak into strips and then place it right over the top of it. But you can just serve it on the side too. Always an escapee right here. Beautiful. And just you toss it. You just want to make sure you get all of your noodles coated in the sauce. And the great thing about rigatoni is it doesn't get really soggy. So this is one of those pastas that will be really great reheated as a leftover the next day. So we've got our pasta right here. And then I'm going to give it a nice little sprinkle of cheese right over the top. And then we'll do our little garnishes that I had saved. So we've got our fresh basil and our fresh parsley that we had minced up. And we're just gonna sprinkle that right on the top.
You have a question? What's the sourdough for the evening?
We made our traditional basic loaf, and then we made a Gouda, thyme, and black pepper, which I believe are almost ready to come out. But we're gonna take our steaks. I'm gonna check on my steaks real quick. I'm gonna pull them out. And we're gonna give them, I'm gonna do my touch test. So I always say, there's a little trick on your face. So if your steak feels like your cheek, it's a rare. If your steak feels like your nose, it's a medium rare, your chin a medium, and your forehead is like a well done. So these are our food that we're eating for our family, so I'm fine touching them. But I can tell you right now, this is about, this one's more of a rare. These ones are more of medium rare. So we're gonna just pop this in for a minute or two longer. That one can cook up a little bit longer. And then we'll be about ready to serve our sourdoughs. I'm gonna pull those out. So if you wanna come, we're gonna pull the sourdough out because they are just about ready. But I find for the test, I always just give it a little poke with the meat because it really does give you the perfect cooking without having to do a bunch of thermometers or whatnot. Here is our first one. This is our Gouda, black pepper, and fresh thyme sourdough. So I'm gonna bring this over here. It's nice and hot. I'll put it right here. I'm gonna move my salad out of the way. I'm gonna turn off our pasta. And then we're gonna get our traditional loaf out. I'll pull them out and then we'll grab our steak and we'll have some dinner. And this is our traditional loaf. Now, if you are a person who loves a really dark crust, pop it in for about 5 more minutes if you want. I tend to like a more mild crust because I cut it up and I save it for sandwiches and grilled cheeses. And if you get it a really dark crust in the beginning, it's just not as good for toasting up later. So here is our beautiful thyme, black pepper things. I'll see if I can lift up, show you guys the bottom of our loaf. We've got a nice golden crust on the bottom. And this is our traditional loaf. Pretty, pretty. And it's super easy to make. Okay, let's grab our steaks out and we're gonna serve up dinner. Okay. Pull this guy out, nice and hot. And we will be ready to serve. Get this out of the way. I'm gonna pop the oven shut. Now, for our sourdough, we won't cut into this because if you're new to making sourdough, you don't want to cut into it for about 5 to 10 minutes. If you do, all that natural moisture escapes out and then you're gonna have a drier, more gummy bread. So let's serve up dinner. So we are going to have our yummy tomato and basil pasta. Look at beautiful. And let me grab a fork to get our steak out. This one looks beautiful right here. Nice, juicy. That's why you want to finish it off in the oven. And that will be our dinner tonight plus our salad. And don't forget our beautiful sourdough loaves. They're just perfection. Okay guys, well thank you for joining us today. We made our lovely steak and our pasta and our sourdough and a salad. We try to do live shows every single day, so don't forget to like and subscribe. And feel free to send us a message or comment if you have any recipe requests or any cooking questions, because we love to answer those for you guys. Thanks again.